Church of Corruption begins at sunset, with a ray of light illuminating the far door at the end of the room. I replaced the pillars since its last version with more distinctive black ones to make more distinctive the way you're meant to go. I also ended up replacing a lot of the previous pillars so that players aren't distracted by them. I did end up changing the assets for these ones because I couldn't find a way to make the floating pillars look good. This section is largely the same as before, except I made the window a little larger. And I also included a fallen statue and a lantern in case players fall down and need a way to get back up. If they do fall, this little shortcut will take them right back to the middle point, where they can continue on. As they go jumping through, they must plan to avoid enemies and move quickly. The large platforms are meant to incentivize moving quickly but cautiously, and having the opportunity to evade these properly. Once you reach the end, you enter the garden, a more peaceful and desolate environment from the outside. It is here that they will learn about collecting keys. I changed the door location from one wall to another and put them all together instead, because now when players see the key colors and see the next one, they'll notice that they're the same, and therefore hopefully put together the idea that collecting keys will open these doors. And once all three are collected and there's nothing more to collect, the big door will open and players can continue onwards. I also tested to make sure that it is impossible to get through in or out from the mushroom walls in order to prevent progression. I also changed the trigger for that checkpoint to make it a little bit higher so players cannot accidentally jump through the hole without activating it. The next section will have more keys to collect, as well as introducing guns. I replaced here the glowing mushrooms from previous iterations because players would tell me that they blended with the keys and sort of confused them as to where they're meant to go. There's also an extra lantern here added for visual aid, because while this section is quite dark, it's not meant to be impossible to navigate. The large enemy also has more health added to it to make it feel more as a threat and less as a two-hit enemy like the other ones are. As you jump over this path, this is still the intended path, and however there are many options as this is a large open area. I made this wall larger than before in order to avoid those enemies sniping you from across the map. There's also another key that can be collected by using the same jumping trick with the hedge as in the last one. And while it's not required to kill these enemies, it does make the journey a little easier. I also made this key open the door closest to the exit so that players can see it more easily. Once they reach this next area, through the checkpoint, they'll find that this area has been completely revamped from its previous iterations. It is now a more simple path rather than a 3-platform arena, as it used to be, as I believe the path will more closely follow the atmosphere of what the church is meant to represent and the platforming section is meant to have. I also added some more ammunition in case players run out, and once all enemies are defeated, they can move on to the next section. You'll also notice that the enemies are more easily marked. This was because many players would tell me that they blended into either the shadows or the light, so either way it was very difficult for them to see them and shoot properly without getting hit first. Once all enemies are defeated a second time, players will hopefully by now understand that killing enemies will also open doors. And with that we reach a little rest section before entering the final stage. I included a light here and then moved the checkpoint from there to right beyond the door. That way you can collect all your resources and then trigger the checkpoint. This last section has been changed heavily from its original iteration, where it used to be one giant enemy. It is now a collection of smaller enemies put behind walls. This was because I had to limit what my scope was, and I had to realize that my skills and abilities were not enough to have what I fully envisioned. Therefore, I made this alternative as an alternative to that. I also included some cover to make the area a bit more dynamic and not just jumping from platform to platform. But you are incentivized to do that, as these walls do mean you can't just shoot through them to hit all the enemies from one pillar. Once all the enemies are killed and all the keys are collected as well, the player will have hopefully understood that when they're together, this is what you must do in order to advance, as the 2 stages previously would indicate keys and enemies. Once that is defeated, you will be going through to the last stage, the church remade. This is a much more peaceful environment. It is just copied from the first stage, but it's meant to represent that the evil has been defeated and the corruption is no more. However, the castle does remain empty to continue this atmospheric, sort of quiet, desolate vibe to it. But once the evil is defeated and you reach the end of this parkouring section, the level is over.